Housewife by Design. The 4-Step Strategy to Building a Life of Grace, Support, and Intentional Peace by Alyssa Benjamin. Copyright 2026 by Alyssa Benjamin. All rights reserved. No part of this publication may be reproduced, stored, or transmitted in any form or by any means, electronic, mechanical, photocopying, recording, scanning, or otherwise, without written permission from the publisher. It is illegal to copy this book, post it to a website, or distribute it by any other means without permission. First edition. Prelude. The Threshold. If you have picked up this book, I know exactly who you are. You are the woman everyone depends on. You are the one who executes the vision, manages the crisis, and holds the line. You have spent years proving your competence in boardrooms, in community groups, and in the relentless, exhausting arena of the modern hustle. You have been praised for your strength, your resilience, and your ability to carry the world without breaking a sweat. But I also know what happens when the applause stops and you finally close the door behind you. I know the quiet, heavy exhaustion that settles into your bones. I know the silent resentment of a life that looks successful on paper but feels like a treadmill in reality. I know the deep, terrifying suspicion that you are trading your peace for a paycheck, and that if you stop moving, even for a moment, the entire structure will collapse. I know this because I was that woman. For years, we have been sold a lie. We have been told that having it all requires doing it all. We have been conditioned to believe that our value is inextricably linked to our exhaustion, that if we are not grinding, sacrificing, and struggling, we are somehow failing. Particularly as Black women, we have inherited a cultural script that demands we be strong at the expense of being soft, and that we survive at the expense of actually living. This book is the end of that script. What you hold in your hands is not another corporate self-help guide designed to make you a more efficient participant in your own burnout. This is a manifesto for the woman who is ready to step off the treadmill entirely. This is a blueprint for the silent pivot. In the pages that follow, I am going to ask you to do something radical. I am going to ask you to drop your invisible resume. I am going to ask you to stop managing the chaos and start curating your peace. I am going to show you how to take the brilliant strategic intellect you have spent years building and redirect it to the only organization that truly deserves it. Your home. The transition will not be easy. The world will try to erase your ambition the moment you choose your sanctuary over an office. They will assume your intellect evaporated. They will try to pull you back into the conflict. But you are about to learn that true security does not come from a corporate title. It comes from the unshakable architecture of a life you have designed intentionally. It comes from vetting carefully, upskilling in private, and building systems so elegant they run on autopilot. You do not need an invitation to live beautifully, and you do not need permission to rest. Take a breath. Leave the noise of the hustle at the door. Welcome to your life by design. Part 1. The cultural problem. The silent pivot. The day you walk away from the corporate ladder, the desk goes quiet, but the noise in the world gets louder. Society has a name for what you're doing. A step down. They see the removal of a title as the removal of a brain. This is what I call the erasure effect. A cultural demotion that assumes your ambition, your strategic intellect, and your professional value simply evaporated the moment you choose the 4 walls of your home over the glass walls of an office. For many of us, particularly as Black women, this transition is even more fraught. We are born into a cultural inheritance of survival. We are praised for being the strong Black woman, the one who carries the world, the one who hustles until she breaks, the one who manages the conflict loops of a single-parent household or a high-stress career with a smile. To choose peace over hustle feels like a betrayal of the tribe. But here's the truth they won't tell you. Survival is not a legacy. Your life is not a fallback plan. It is your life's work. You aren't retiring from ambition. You are redirecting it to the only organization that truly belongs to you, your home. In this first part, we are going to strip the site. We are going to dismantle the belief systems that have never served us, the ones rooted in entertainment and conflict, and replace them with a blueprint for stability. Before you can build a life by design, you have to understand why the world is so committed to seeing you fail. If you're anything like me, you've spent years layering new habits on top of old, cracked belief systems that weren't even yours to begin with. We've been fed a cultural diet of conflict and struggle, stories that make for great television but leave you with a miserable reality. We've been taught that if we aren't grinding, we aren't valuable. I'm here to tell you that's a lie designed to keep you exhausted, predictable, and frankly, easy to ignore. Before you can even think about a life by design, you have to understand why the world is so deeply committed to seeing you fail at it. It's not just the culture. It's the fact that a woman who has found her peace is a woman they can no longer control or profit from. Chapter 1. The Erasure Effect. The first thing you'll notice is the silence. When you're in the corporate world, your phone is a steady hum of urgency. You are CC'd, looped in, and needed for every fire drill and board deck. Your calendar is a crowded map of other people's priorities. But the day after you hand in that badge and walk into your own home as its chief executive, the hum stops. At first, it feels like peace. Then, it starts to feel like an exit. This is where the erasure effect begins. It's a quiet, cultural demotion that happens in the minds of everyone, from your former colleagues to your own family. They see you've stepped off the ladder, and they assume you've fallen off the map. I remember the first time I felt it at a dinner party. Someone asked that standard loaded question. So what do you do? When I used to have a title, I had a script. I had a way to signal my status and my usefulness to the room. But when I answered, I'm at home right now, I watched the light behind their eyes go out. They didn't see a woman who had just made a strategic move to secure her family's future. They saw a woman who had opted out of having a brain. The conversation didn't just shift, it evaporated. The IQ myth. The world is deeply invested in the lie that your intellect is tied to your paycheck. They think that because you aren't charging for your time is no longer valuable. We've been conditioned to believe that strategic intellect is something you leave at the office, like a laptop charger. But you didn't lose your 10 years of experience, your ability to manage complex logistics, or your high-level negotiation skills just because you changed your venue. You didn't become lesser than because you're managing an ecosystem instead of a department. For us, especially as Black women, the demotion feels even sharper. We are expected to be the strong Black woman who does it all, the one who holds down the job, the side hustle, and the home with zero complaints. When you choose to focus your strength on your home, the tribe often views it as a waste of potential. They don't see the power in a woman who refuses to be a helper for someone else's empire so she can be the architect of her own. The helper trap. The erasure effect isn't just about how strangers see you. It's about how your circle begins to treat you. Suddenly, because you're at home, people assume your time is infinitely elastic. You become the first person they call for the last-minute favor, the midday errand, or the volunteer task that nobody else wants to do. They start treating you like a pair of hands instead of a head. If you don't define your own value, society will assign you a sale price. They will treat you as a resource to be used, rather than a leader to be respected. If you aren't careful, you'll start believing them. You'll start feeling like you need to justify your existence by being busy instead of being effective. You'll fall into the trap of doing more busy work just to prove you aren't lazy, while your actual goals, the stability and peace you pivoted for, get pushed to the back burner. Reclaiming the standard. The erasure effect only works if you allow yourself to be erased. The pivot you made wasn't an exit. It was a reallocation of assets. You took your most valuable resource, your time, and your talent, and you brought it back to the organization that matters most. Chapter 2. Entertainment versus architecture. If you want to understand why your life feels like a constant uphill battle, look at what you're watching. And I don't just mean the shows on your TV. I mean the scripts we've been handed for how a successful woman is supposed to behave. In the world of entertainment, conflict is the currency. A movie where everything goes right and everyone is at peace wouldn't make it past the first 5 minutes. To keep an audience hooked, you need drama, struggle, and a protagonist who is constantly fighting to keep her head above water. The problem is that we've started treating our lives like a production instead of a project. We've adopted a belief system rooted in entertainment, which thrives on chaos, when what we actually need is architecture, which thrives on peace, the trap of the strong Black woman. For us, the primary script we're handed is the strong Black woman trope. On the surface, it sounds like a compliment. It's a badge of honor for our resilience, our ability to carry the community, and our knack for making something out of nothing. But if you look closer, that strength is often just a code word for unpaid labor and emotional exhaustion. The trope teaches us that our value is tied to how much we can endure. It tells us that we should be able to work the high-stress job, raise the children alone, manage the household, and solve everyone else's problems without breaking a sweat. It's a narrative that glorifies the struggle while ignoring the toll it takes on our spirits. When you are praised for your strength in a crisis, you will unconsciously begin to seek out crises just to feel valuable again. This is how we get stuck in conflict loops. Because we've been raised in environments and fed media where the single-parent struggle is the norm, our brains are actually wired to find comfort in the chaos. When things are quiet, we feel anxious. When a man offers to provide, we feel suspicious. We've been trained to be strong alone, so the idea of being stable together feels like a loss of control. Conflict loops versus peace loops. A conflict loop is a self-sabotaging circle. You work harder to build alone because you don't trust the foundation of a partnership. That overworking leads to stress, which leads to a lack of nurturing at home, which eventually leads back to the very single-parent environment you were trying to escape. It's a loop that feels productive because it's high energy, but it's actually just a treadmill. Architecture is different. Architecture is about the peace loop. It's the quiet, steady work of setting a standard and then allowing the structure to support you. The conflict loop says, I have to do everything because nobody else will. The peace loop says, I have set the standard for my home, and I have the systems in place to ensure it runs with or without my constant manual labor. Rewiring for the boredom of peace. The hardest part of the silent pivot isn't the logistics. It's the psychological withdrawal from the high of the struggle. When you first move into a life by design, you might feel bored. You might feel like you aren't doing enough because you aren't exhausted. This is the moment where most women sabotage themselves. They pick up a new busy work project or start an unnecessary argument just to get that familiar hit of adrenaline. You have to understand that peace is not a waste of time. Stable families aren't built on television-worthy drama. They are built on the boring consistency of shared meals, early bedtimes, and financial transparency. You have to be willing to be uninteresting to the old world so you can be foundational to your new one. Breaking the tribe's script. Choosing peace often feels like a betrayal of the tribe. When you stop participating in the struggle Olympics with your friends or family, they might call you changed or even hypocritical. They need you to stay in the conflict loop because your struggle validates theirs. When you break the cycle and choose a traditional supported path, you become a mirror that shows them their own lack of foundation. Don't apologize for the mirror. Your legacy isn't how much you can carry, it's how much you can build. By choosing architecture over entertainment, you are giving the next generation a new script, one where they don't have to be strong just to survive, because they were born into a structure that was designed for them to thrive. Chapter 3, My 10-Year Timeline. We have a massive cultural problem with patience, and it's entirely the fault of the internet. If you scroll through your feed right now, you will see a parade of momentum years. You'll see the woman who quit her job on Tuesday, launched a business on Thursday, and bought a boat by Sunday. You'll see the traditional wife who seems to float through a perfectly curated home without breaking a sweat, supported by a husband who just happened to arrive fully formed and perfectly aligned with her goals. We watch the highlight reel of day 30 and wonder why we're struggling on day 1. Here is the truth. There is no such thing as an overnight architecture. When people look at my life now, the peace, the stability, the fact that I don't have to hustle to keep the lights on, they often assume it's disingenuous. They think it's easy for me or that I just got lucky. They don't see the decade of unglamorous, often terrifying foundational work that made this momentum year possible. If you try to skip the foundation and jump straight to the finish line, your house will collapse the first time the wind blows. This chapter is about the succession of stability. It's about why true peace takes a decade to cure, and why that is actually the best news you could possibly hear. The iceberg of the architect. Success in a life by design is like an iceberg. The 10% above the water is what everyone sees and envies. The 90% below the water is the decade of strategic patience required to keep the whole thing afloat. Let me break down my 10-year timeline so you can see exactly what the deep foundation actually looks like. Years 1 to 3, the deprogramming and vetting. I didn't start with a perfect partner. I started with a broken heart and a decision to change my standards. I had to deprogram the strong Black woman narrative out of my head and replace it with the strategic woman. I spent these years learning how to vet for a partner who didn't just have potential, but had the capacity to be the head of a traditional home. If you skip this step, you will end up married to your biggest obstacle. Years 4 to 7, the personal dowry transition. This is the part everyone wants to skip. People see the sole provider setup and assume it was a gift. It wasn't. It was a 3-year strategic transition. We started by splitting bills, and over those years, I used my savings as a personal dowry. I literally invested my own money to bridge the gap between my husband being a single man and becoming the sole provider for our family. I bought the time required for him to step up, and I used that time to upskill in private. Years 8 to 9, trial and error, the curing phase. Once the stability was secured, I didn't instantly launch a massive business. I failed. I tried things that didn't work. I took free photos and did volunteer work. This is the curing phase of the cement. Because I had built the financial foundation first, I had the luxury of failing safely. I built my competence without the pressure of survival. Year 10, the momentum year. This is the year everyone sees. The systems are in place, the foundation is solid, and suddenly the house goes up seemingly overnight. But it's not magic, it's math. It's the compound interest of a decade of intentional decisions, the danger of skipping steps. I see so many brilliant women trying to hack this process. They skip the vetting phase, marry for vibes, and end up hustling at home just to survive a bad partnership. They skip the personal dowry phase, demanding a fully formed provider immediately, and end up frustrated when the transition takes time. They skip the trial and error phase, launching a business out of desperation rather than strategy, and their confidence shatters at the first rejection because they haven't built the resilience of a worker. If you skip the foundation, you aren't saving time. You are just scheduling a collapse. Consistency versus the hack. The world will tell you to find a shortcut. The world will try to sell you a 6-week transformation into a life of ease. Do not buy it. The 10-year timeline isn't a sentence. It's a strategy. It means you don't have to have it all figured out today. It means that the boring work you are doing right now, setting boundaries, saving a little money, learning a new skill in the margins of your day, is actually the heavy machinery building your future peace. Part 2, a foundation of grace. The strategy of alignment. Now that we've cleared away the cultural noise and the exhausting strong black woman tropes, it's time to get to the root of your peace. Let's be real. This transition isn't about the glamorous, curated, soft life aesthetics you see on your timeline. It's about the intentional, behind-the-scenes strategy that actually secures it. If you want a life where you have the freedom to manage your home, refine your systems, and exist fully in your peace without the quiet panic of keeping the lights on, you have to get ruthlessly clear on 2 things: who you align with and how you fund the pivot. I didn't arrive at my life by design, by accident, or good luck. Over 10 years ago, after a devastating breakup left me staring at a reality I knew I didn't want, I made a radical choice. I stopped dating for vibes and started dating for capacity. I stopped splitting bills blindly and started putting my own frameworks to the test. I enrolled in wife school. I shifted my standards. I learned that stepping into a traditional supported dynamic isn't about waiting to be rescued. It's about strategic positioning. Chapter 4, choosing well. Let's have a very honest conversation about courtship. In our modern culture, dating has become a transaction. We are taught to look for a partner in crime or someone to match our hustle. We approach dating the same way we approach networking, looking for a resume that makes sense on paper and seeking an agreement that divides everything right down the middle. But if your ultimate desire is to step out of the hustle and become the heart of a traditional, peaceful home, you cannot date like a modern roommate. The single biggest mistake I see ambitious, brilliant women make is deciding they want a life by design, a life where they have the freedom and time to nurture their family and themselves, but marrying a man who is looking for a 50-50 financial split. You simply cannot cultivate a sanctuary with a man who resents being the primary provider. When I was ready to date again after my world was turned upside down, I didn't just hop back on the apps and hope for the best. I stopped. I enrolled in wife school. I realized that if I wanted a man capable of carrying the financial and protective weight of our future family, I could not show up with the energy of a corporate competitor. I had to learn the skills, the standards, and the grace of a woman who was ready to be a true partner. I wasn't looking for a man to complete me. I was looking for a man with the capacity to lead. The 50-50 trap. Culture tells us that 50-50 is the only fair and empowered way to operate a modern relationship. But 50-50 is a corporate merger, not a marriage. It works beautifully if both of you plan to stay on the corporate ladder forever, outsourcing your children, your meals, and your peace to the highest bidder. But if your vision is to step inside the home to cultivate your family's legacy, the 50-50 model will exhaust you. Why? Because you will inevitably end up doing 100% of the domestic and emotional nurturing while still being expected to pull 50% of the financial weight. That is not a partnership. That is a recipe for burnout. When you vet a man, you are not looking for someone to split the rent. You are looking for capacity. Does he have the psychological and emotional capacity to wake up every day, knowing the financial survival of the family rests on his shoulders? And does he do it with pride rather than resentment? Does he view providing for you as a burden or as an honor? A man who is meant to carry the weight of a family does so with a sense of dignity. He understands that by taking on the responsibility of the world outside, he is gifting his wife the freedom to cultivate the world within. Vetting for character, not just potential. We, as women, are naturally nurturing. We love to see the potential in people, but you cannot afford to marry for potential if realizing that potential requires you to act as his mother, his therapist, and his bank. You must look at who he is today. You are assessing his character. Does he lead the planning of your time together, or does he wait for you to do the logistical labor? Does he speak about his resources as tools to protect and care for the people he loves, or does he speak about them as toys for his own ego? Does your calm demeanor bring him peace, or does he try to provoke you into an argument just to feel a spark? You are looking for a man of deep character who considers it an absolute privilege to protect your peace. The quiet standard. Here is the part that often offends people who are committed to the struggle. You must become the standard before you can demand it. I didn't walk around announcing my new standards to the world. True elegance is found in discretion. I grew into my standards in private. I knew that if I told my friends, or even the men I went on early dates with, that I was looking for a traditional sole provider dynamic, I might be mocked. I would be called a hypocrite, or told I was throwing away my independence. So I kept my vision close to my heart and my eyes wide open. I didn't try to explain my desires to a man who only wanted a casual arrangement. If a gentleman showed me that he lacked the capacity or the desire to be a provider, I didn't try to fix him or argue with him. I simply, politely, wished him well and walked away. By setting this standard in private, I protected my own peace. And ultimately, with the quiet grace and clarity I had cultivated, I attracted exactly the kind of man I had envisioned, my husband. He wasn't a finished portrait on the day we met, but he had a good, honest heart and the undeniable capacity to become the remarkable provider he is today. How we navigated those early years together and how I used my own resources to lovingly support his transition into that role is a testament to patience, and it is the bridge we will cross in the next chapter. Chapter 5. The Personal Dowry. You have chosen a partner of character. He shares your vision for a traditional, peaceful home, and he views the responsibility of providing as an honor, not a burden. But a vision is not yet a reality, and the distance between the two must be crossed. In our modern culture, women are often told to wait at the finish line for a man who is already a fully realized, wealthy provider. We are taught to demand a finished product. But true partnership, especially when you are transitioning out of a 50-50 paradigm, often requires a season of strategic patience. When my husband and I decided to move toward a sole provider household, he was not yet in a position to carry the entire financial weight of a family effortlessly. He had the character, the work ethic, and the undeniable willingness, but he needed time. A man needs a runway to shift his psychology and his career from, I provide for myself, to, I carry the world for us. Instead of demanding a miracle overnight, or worse, resigning myself to a permanent 50-50 split out of impatience, I made a strategic decision. I used my own savings to fund the transition. I treated my financial reserves as a personal dowry, a temporary, self-contained power source to maintain our peace while he built his capacity to carry the full load. The investor versus the roommate. Let us be very clear about a crucial distinction. Deploying your savings as a personal dowry is not the same as subsidizing a man who lacks ambition. When you split bills indefinitely with a man who has no intention of ever taking the lead, you can unintentionally fall into the role of roommate. You are paying for the privilege of sharing space. But when you thoughtfully deploy your savings to give a capable man the time he needs to pivot his career, secure a promotion, or scale his business, you are acting as an investor. You are providing the seed capital for your family's future peace. I viewed my savings not as an escape fund, but as an instrument of grace. It was the bridge that allowed us to step away from the stress of the modern hustle and walk gradually into the stability of a traditional dynamic. It bought us the most valuable asset in any marriage: time. The initiation of trust. I will not pretend this was an easy season. It was, in many ways, terrifying. As the months passed and I watched my savings account slowly deplete, the fear would inevitably creep in. The world conditions us to believe that a woman without a constant, independent paycheck is in grave danger. There were moments when the anxiety threatened to overwhelm me, and the temptation to panic, to rush back into the corporate world, to complain, or to doubt his timeline was incredibly strong. But I knew that if I panicked, I would sabotage the very life we were building. If I allowed fear to strip away my grace, I would confirm the cultural lie that women are too anxious to allow men to lead. During this season, your peace is your most powerful contribution. When my battery began to run low, I kept my fears private. I refused to let my anxiety become his burden. I understood that if I wanted him to step fully into his strength, I could not constantly remind him of my sacrifice. I had to let the dowry run its course with quiet dignity so his provision could fully take over. Holding the vision, when you are in the personal dowry phase, you will feel the friction of living between two worlds. You are no longer the independent corporate climber, but you are not yet the fully supported woman of leisure. You are in the middle. This is the season where you must hold the vision tightly. You must remind yourself that, in this circumstance, the dowry is designed to be depleted. Its entire purpose is to provide energy until the new dynamic is fully operational. When that transition finally happens, when your reserves are spent, but you look up and realize that his capacity has expanded to cover it all seamlessly, the profound sense of security is indescribable. You will know that you didn't just stumble into a beautiful life. You invested in it, you nurtured it, and you possessed the quiet strength to see it through. Of course, letting go of your financial independence requires another form of security. You must ensure that even as you pour your resources into your marriage, you are never left empty-handed. How we protect our minds and maintain our personal value during this vulnerable transition is the subject of our next chapter. Chapter 6, Intellectual Growth. Let's address the elephant in the room. The moment you decide to step away from the corporate ladder and allow a man to fully provide for you, the world will tell you that you are making a dangerous mistake. Your friends, your family, and every modern cultural script will ask you the same terrifying question. But what if he leaves? What if something happens? You are risking everything by giving up your own money. It is a valid fear, but it is rooted in a fundamental misunderstanding of what actually keeps a woman safe. We have been conditioned to believe that a bi-weekly paycheck from a corporation is the ultimate safety net. We stay in soul-crushing jobs because we think that direct deposit is our only shield against ruin. But a job is not a safety net. A job can be lost, downsized, or eliminated in an afternoon. True security does not come from a title or a desk. True security comes from competence. When I made the transition from splitting bills to stepping fully into my home, I didn't view it as risking it all. I saw it as reallocating my capital. I was exchanging liquid cash for the time required to build a more permanent, unshakable form of stability. I knew that even if the marriage failed or the economy turned, my market value as a woman was actually increasing because of one non-negotiable habit: intellectual growth. Your competence is your currency. Most people assume that when a woman becomes a traditional housewife, her brain goes dormant. They think we spend our days watching daytime television and losing our professional edge. But a life by design requires you to be the sharpest, most strategic person in the room. You aren't retiring your intellect, you are redirecting it. During my transition years, I made a commitment to upskill in private. I read relentlessly. I learned business principles, strategy, and operations. I stayed deeply connected to my organizations and to women in the know. I treated my mind as my most valuable asset. Upskilling is the insurance policy you pay for with your time. When you possess high-level skills, risk is just an illusion. You aren't betting on the market. You are betting on your own undeniable ability to figure it out. I knew that because I was a focused, hard worker who learned something new every single day, I could pivot in any direction if necessary. If everything fell apart, I could always get another job. I never once entertained the thought that I wouldn't be able to figure out my next move. That deep, quiet confidence is the only safety net you will ever need. The ego shield, refusing to be embarrassed. There will be a season during your transition where you might look like a failure to the outside world. When my personal savings ran out during our bridging phase, the fear became very real. It was mentally difficult, especially because there were people around me who were more than happy to make me feel like I was failing, simply because I wasn't playing by the corporate rules anymore. This is the moment where most women fold. They get embarrassed by the struggle, so they run back to the 50-50 hustle just to save face. You have to develop an ego shield. You must refuse to let the opinions of small-minded people dictate your moves. In our community, saving face and looking successful are often prioritized over being stable. You have to be willing to look like you are losing to people who are playing an entirely different game. I made a decision early on. I absolutely refused to be embarrassed. Embarrassment is a tax that the insecure try to levy against the ambitious. If you refuse to pay it, they have no power over you. I decided I would continue to go, quietly and consistently, until I found a way to win on my own terms. The ultimate freedom. When you possess intellectual insurance, the dynamic of your marriage changes. You are not staying with your husband because you are trapped, helpless, or incapable of feeding yourself. You are staying because you choose to be there. You are actively choosing to cultivate his peace, nurture your children, and manage your home from a place of immense personal power. There is nothing more elegant than a woman who knows she can survive any storm, but intentionally chooses to create a sanctuary of calm instead. By vetting carefully, deploying your personal battery strategically, and protecting your intellect ruthlessly, you have done the quiet, unglamorous work. The roots are deep, the soil is secure. Now you have the absolute freedom to step into the light and begin the beautiful work of designing your life. Part 3. 4 Steps to Building the Life You Desire. The Season of Cultivation. Now that your roots are secure, your partner is aligned, and your financial transition has been thoughtfully managed, you are finally standing in the space you sacrificed to create. The corporate noise has quieted. The hustle has been left at the door. You are the heart of your home. But a life of peace does not mean a life of stagnation. You didn't step away from the grind just to sit quietly while the world spins without you. You stepped away to design a life of profound, intentional impact. You secured your peace so you could finally operate from a place of power rather than a place of panic. This is where we move from preparation into execution. This is where your private upskilling, your quiet observations, and your strategic mind finally meet the world. Chapter 7. Step 1. Integration. It is a beautiful thing to curate your home, but a woman of true influence never exists in a vacuum. If you want to build a life that feels deeply fulfilling, you must purposefully step outside your front door and place yourself in the right rooms. I call this integration. It is the art of finding the right organizations, boards, or community groups that align with your vision and put you in the company of women who are doing the things you want to do. When you first make the silent pivot, it is very easy to fall into the isolation trap. You are no longer interacting with coworkers every day, and you and your work friends might find yourself with very little to talk about. If you stay in this isolation too long, your world shrinks and your brilliant mind goes underutilized. You need to integrate into spaces that pull you upward, auditing your gaps. Before you join a single committee or volunteer for a single event, you must sit down and do an honest audit of your current life. What is missing? Do you need access to women who have successfully raised confident, well-adjusted children? Do you need to be around women who understand the nuances of running a high-end philanthropic event? Do you need connections to local business owners who can eventually become clients when you are ready to monetize? You do not join an organization just to have somewhere to go on a Tuesday morning. You join an organization because it bridges a gap between where you are and where you want to be. Strategic service. When you find the right organization, your goal is not to show up and loudly announce how smart you are. Your goal is to serve. But there is a distinct difference between being a martyr and being strategic. A martyr takes on the busy work that exhausts her, the late-night cleanups, the chaotic phone trees, the tasks that leave her drained and resentful. A strategic woman looks at the organization, identifies a high-level problem, and quietly solves it using the skills she developed during her season of intellectual growth. If the organization's communication is a mess, you don't complain. You elegantly step in and streamline their newsletters. If their events look amateurish, you offer to take on the visual styling. You offer your gifts in a way that elevates the entire group. True influence is never forced. It is earned through the quiet, consistent delivery of excellence, the power of women in the know. By integrating strategically and serving at a high level, something magical happens. You bypass the superficial networking and go straight to earning the respect of the leaders. You become inextricably linked to the women in the know. These are the women who have the resources, the connections, and the wisdom you need. When they see you operating with grace, competence, and reliability, they do not view you as just a housewife. They view you as an equal. They view you as a peer. This is how you build your new community. You don't have to convince anyone of your value. You simply place yourself in an environment where your value is undeniable, and you let your work speak for itself. By integrating beautifully into these spaces, you are setting the stage for the next step, positioning yourself so perfectly that when people need something done right, you are the only woman they think to call. Chapter 8. Step 2. Positioning. You are in the room. You have audited your gaps and aligned yourself with an organization that pulls you upward. Now, how do you make them realize your immense value without ever having to say a word? In the corporate world, you lead with a resume. You hand over a piece of paper that lists your past titles and demand that people respect your authority. But in a life by design, you do not demand respect. You command it through your presence and your output. You do not beg for a seat at the table. You simply sit down and elegantly demonstrate that the table is profoundly better because you are there. This is the art of positioning. It is the delicate, intentional process of moving from a new face in the room to an utterly indispensable asset. And you do it through a concept I call serving to deserve. Serving to deserve. When I first stepped into my new life, I knew I eventually wanted to generate an income on my own terms. I wanted to take private strategy clients and do high-end creative work. But I did not walk into my new community groups and start handing out business cards. Instead, I offered my gifts freely. I did free portfolio building photo shoots. When the organization was thrown into a panic over an urgent last-minute request from a national office, I quietly stepped in, organized the chaos, and handled it with professional polish. Many women confuse this with being a people pleaser or falling back into the helper trap. But there is a massive difference between doing menial tasks out of an inability to say no and executing high-level tasks as a strategic demonstration of your brilliance. A martyr works for free because she doesn't know her worth. A strategist works for free to gather the leverage she needs to name her price. My free work was not a favor. It was research and development. It allowed me to create visual, undeniable proof of my skills without the paralyzing pressure of a high-ticket contract. I was serving the organization to deserve my reputation. I was auditioning them as much as they were experiencing me. The proof of contrast. When you serve at this level, you create something incredibly powerful. The proof of contrast. Most organizations, volunteer boards, and community groups operate in a perpetual state of low-grade panic. Because they are run by volunteers who are often exhausted from their own lives, the standard of execution is usually quite low. Emails are late, graphics are sloppy, and crises are managed with anxiety. When you, a woman who has secured her peace, protected her intellect, and organized her home, step into that environment, the contrast is blinding. You do not panic when an urgent request comes in. You calmly open your organized files, pull a template you've already created, and deliver a flawless result in 10 minutes. When they see the ease with which you operate, they don't just see a finished task. They see a woman who possesses a secret they desperately want to learn. You become a living testament to the power of a well-ordered life. Your peace becomes your marketing. Your elegance becomes your brand. The shift from helpful to high value, the proof of contrast, naturally elevates your status. Very quickly, people will stop asking you to do the minor, draining tasks because they realize your mind is too valuable to waste on busy work. When the high-stakes problems arise, they will look to you. You become the go-to woman, but a wise woman knows that she cannot remain the go-to volunteer forever. If you stay in this phase indefinitely, you will burn out, and you will begin to resent the very community you sought out. Positioning is simply the bridge. You are establishing your undeniable competence so that when you are ready to pivot to profit, the transition is seamless. When people ask, "How do you do it?" or "Can you help my business look like this?" you will not have to sell yourself. The contrast has already done the selling. All you have to do is elegantly present the systems you use to get the job done, which brings us to the next crucial step of your cultivation, Chapter 9. Step 3. Discovering your systems. Being the woman everyone depends on is flattering. When you have successfully positioned yourself, when your community, your board, or your friends see the undeniable proof of contrast you bring to the table, they will naturally flock to you. You are no longer just a participant, you are the go-to woman. But if you are not careful, being the go-to woman simply becomes a new, more beautiful cage. If every time someone needs your brilliance, it requires your immediate time, your physical energy, and your emotional bandwidth, you have not escaped the hustle. You have just volunteered for it. To protect your sanctuary, you must transition from being the hands that do the labor to the visionary who owns the rhythm. You do this through the elegant discovery and implementation of systems. A system is not a cold, corporate mechanism. In a life by design, a system is the ultimate act of self-care. It is a decision you make once so that you never have to waste your precious energy making it again. And the way you discover the perfect systems for your life is through a practice of radical curiosity. Radical curiosity, finding the friction. We are deeply conditioned to push through our frustration. When a morning feels chaotic, or when a last-minute request from an organization sends us into a tailspin, our instinct is to grit our teeth, complain to a girlfriend, and just get it done. But a visionary does not complain about friction. She gets curious about it. Radical curiosity means stepping back the moment you feel a tightening in your chest or a drain on your battery. You ask yourself, Why did this feel so difficult? Where is the leak in my piece? If you find yourself frantically searching for the right photo for a community newsletter every single month, curiosity says, this is a predictable problem. How can I solve this before it happens again? That curiosity leads you to create a beautiful, organized digital folder of pre-approved images. If dinner time consistently feels like a scramble that ruins the calm of your evening, curiosity says, why am I deciding what to cook at 5 p.m.? That curiosity leads you to implement a rotating, seasonal menu that runs on autopilot. Frustration is just a system begging to be born. Standard operating piece. In the corporate world, they rely on standard operating procedures, SOPs, to ensure nothing falls through the cracks. In your home and in your private endeavors, you are going to create your own SOPs, standard operating piece. The goal is to eliminate the guesswork from the predictable parts of your life so that your mind is free to focus on the beautiful, unpredictable parts of living. Discovering these systems requires you to document your excellence. When you execute something flawlessly, whether it's hosting an elegant holiday dinner, organizing a flawless fundraiser for your board, or simply resetting your home on a Sunday, write down exactly how you did it. What ingredients did you need? What was the timeline? What boundaries did you have to enforce to make it happen? You are writing the manual for your own life. Once it is written, you never have to start from scratch again. When a similar event or request arises, you do not panic. You simply open your manual, follow the rhythm you have already established, and execute with breathtaking ease. The grace of implementation. It is one thing to know you need a system. It is another entirely to implement it. Implementation requires discipline, which is a word that often feels heavy. But discipline, when applied to a system of your own making, is just a boundary that protects your joy. To move into implementation, you must start small. Do not attempt to overhaul your entire life in a weekend. Choose one area of friction, perhaps your morning rhythm, or how you handle incoming requests from your community groups. Apply your curiosity, design a simple system, and commit to practicing it until it feels like second nature. When you implement systems, you reclaim your time. You are no longer reacting to the world's emergencies. You are flowing through your days with a quiet, undeniable authority. You have cultivated a life that is so well ordered, it practically sustains itself. And once your life is running on the elegant rhythm of your systems, your time and your genius are finally freed up for the ultimate step, allowing your expertise to effortlessly generate the abundance you desire. Chapter 10, Step 4, Monetization. You have integrated into the right rooms. You have positioned yourself through the undeniable proof of contrast. You have discovered your systems and established a standard operating piece that protects your energy. Now, the final step of the cultivation process. You monetize, but I need you to hear this clearly. Monetization in a life by design looks entirely different than the girl boss hustle you left behind. When you were on the corporate ladder, you traded your time for survival. You needed that paycheck to keep the lights on and the rent paid. But if you have successfully navigated the foundational years, your household survival is already secured. Your husband is carrying the weight of the baseline. You are no longer monetizing out of panic or desperation. You are monetizing from a place of absolute leverage, abundance, and choice. You are no longer chasing the money. You are the money. The you are the asset mindset. When women finally decide to generate an income from home, they often fall into the trap of thinking they need to invent a complex product, open a boutique, or become a full-time content creator. They think they need to sell things. But when you are the woman who brings order to chaos, who streamlines communication, and who executes flawlessly while everyone else is panicking, you don't need to invent a product. Your intellect, your systems, and your deep, unwavering peace are the product. When those community leaders, board members, and business owners watch you operate, they will inevitably ask you for help with their own lives or businesses. When you agree to help them, they aren't paying for a logo, a spreadsheet, or an event plan. They are paying for access to your capacity. They are paying to borrow your peace. You do not need a complicated business model. You just need to confidently put a price tag on the frameworks you use to run your own life. The math of the pivot, the $500 anchor client. The internet wants you to believe that if you aren't making $10,000 a month right out of the gate, your business is a failure. That is the mathematics of the hustle, and we reject it. The mathematics of a life by design starts with what I call the $500 anchor client. Your goal is not to immediately replace your old six-figure salary. Your goal is to find one high-value client or project that pays you $500 a month for something that takes you no more than 5 hours to execute, because you already have the system for it. Perhaps it is managing the digital newsletters for that local nonprofit you used to volunteer for. Perhaps it is doing a monthly strategy call for a local business owner who needs your operational brain. Perhaps it is designing the visual templates for a community leader who has no eye for aesthetics. Why $500? Because it proves the model without breaking your life. It allows you to transition from free, helpful volunteer to paid consultant with minimal friction. It gets you used to receiving money for your expertise without the pressure of a high-volume client roster that would immediately drain your battery and pull you away from your home. Growing at the rate of your capacity. The fastest way to destroy the beautiful sanctuary you have curated is to scale your income faster than your capacity can handle. If you take on 10 anchor clients tomorrow, you will instantly revert to the stressed, exhausted woman you used to be. You will start snapping at your husband, outsourcing your meals, and ignoring your own routines. You will have successfully recreated your corporate nightmare inside your own living room. True security is growing at the exact rate of your capacity. You only take on a second client when the first client's work is completely systematized and requires almost zero emotional bandwidth. You only raise your rates when your proof of contrast is so undeniable that people are sitting on a wait list just to speak with you. You are in control of the dial. If it is the holiday season and your family needs your full attention, you turn the dial down. You take no new clients. If it is the spring and your children are settled in their routines and your home is humming beautifully, you turn the dial up. You are no longer at the mercy of a manager's timeline or a corporation's bottom line. You have built a life where your family gets your best, and the marketplace only gets your surplus. Part 4. True self-care. The psychological walls. You have aligned your partnership. You have positioned yourself with undeniable grace. You have systematized your days, and perhaps you have even begun to monetize your surplus. The external framework of your life is now beautifully ordered, but a sanctuary is only as secure as the walls that protect it. If you have done all the external work, securing a provider, curating your home, finding your community, but you still allow the world's opinions, demands, and anxieties to live rent-free in your mind, you do not have peace. You simply have a very well-decorated cage. In our modern culture, we are sold a very fragile version of self-care. We are told it looks like spa days, expensive face creams, and weekend retreats. But these are just temporary escapes from a life that exhausts us. True self-care is not an escape. It is an enforcement. It is the deep psychological work of creating a life you do not need to run away from, and fiercely protecting the borders of that life. This is where the quietest, yet most rigorous work begins. You must learn to fortify your mind. You must become a woman who is so deeply anchored in her own standards that the chaos of other people cannot uproot her. Chapter 11, The Private Build. There is a distinct moment in this journey when your external world finally matches your internal vision. You are no longer splitting bills in a panic. You have stepped into your home. Your days belong to you, your systems are humming, and you are operating from a place of profound capacity. But suddenly, you realize something unsettling. You have the lifestyle, but you are still carrying the anxiety. You find yourself over-explaining your choices at dinner parties. You catch yourself trying to look busy when your husband walks through the door, terrified he might think you are squandering the time his provision affords you. You listen to the subtle, probing questions from loved ones who are still reminding you of imminent doom, and instead of smiling, you feel the urgent need to defend your peace. If this is happening, your sanctuary is compromised. You have curated the environment, but you have not yet completed the internal work. I call this the private build. It is the psychological fortitude required to stop treating your life like a community project that requires a public vote. The trap of consensus. Women, by our very nature, are communal. We are raised to seek consensus. From the time we are young girls, we check in with each other. Is this outfit okay? Did I sound too harsh in that email? Am I doing the right thing? When we transition out of the traditional workforce and into a life by design, that communal instinct becomes our greatest vulnerability. We look to our circle for validation. We want them to tell us that it is acceptable for us to rest. We want them to give us permission to be supported. But you cannot ask a woman who is exhausted by the hustle to validate the peace she has not yet experienced. When you ask the world for permission to live softly, you are inviting their anxiety, their jealousy, and their limiting beliefs directly into your living room. The world will never give you permission to step off the treadmill because your willingness to step off forces them to question why they are still running. You do not need an invitation to live beautifully, and you certainly do not need a consensus. A queen does not poll the village to see if she is permitted to sit on her own throne. The neutral boundary. To protect your mind, you must master the art of the neutral boundary. We have been taught a very toxic version of what a boundary is. Culture tells us that setting a boundary requires a confrontation. It requires a long, emotionally exhausting conversation where we declare our feelings, demand respect, and wait for the other person to understand our side. But an emotional boundary is just a negotiation in disguise. It shows the other person that they still have access to your nervous system. A neutral boundary, on the other hand, is a simple, unshakable statement of fact, delivered with the absolute grace of a woman who knows her worth. It requires zero anger, zero over-explaining, and zero apologies. The emotional boundary. It really hurts my feelings when you make comments about how I don't work anymore. I do so much for this family, and you don't respect my choices. The neutral boundary. My husband and I are very happy with how our home operates. How is your new project at the office going? Notice the difference. The neutral boundary does not invite a debate. It acknowledges the comment, gently closes the door, and elegantly pivots the conversation. It is an energetic shield. Stop defending your peace. There is a profound elegance in being completely unbothered. When you first stop asking for permission, people will test you. They will drop passive-aggressive remarks about how lucky you are, or how they could never just stay home because they are too ambitious. In the past, your ego would have flared. You would have launched into a 10-minute defense of your intellectual pursuits, your investments, and the strategic value of your systems. You would have handed them your invisible resume. You must retire the invisible resume. When someone attempts to provoke you, you must realize that their provocation is a reflection of their exhaustion, not your value. You do not owe anyone a PowerPoint presentation on your household dynamics. You do not owe your extended family a financial breakdown of your husband's capacity. Let them misunderstand you. Let them think you do nothing all day. Let them whisper. Your job is not to manage their perception of your life. Your job is to enjoy the life you have curated. When you stop defending your peace, you reclaim all the energy you used to waste on other people's opinions. You take that energy and you pour it back into your marriage, your children, and your private ambitions. The most powerful thing a woman can do is look at the life she has designed, realize it is exactly what she prayed for, and quietly close the door behind her. Chapter 12. Gray Rocking the Sabotage. There is a phenomenon that occurs when a woman finally steps fully into her peace. When the years of quiet cultivation finally bloom into your momentum year, when your home is humming, your marriage is a true partnership, and your energy is abundant, you will notice a shift in the atmosphere around you. You would think that the people who love you would celebrate your arrival. You would assume they would be thrilled that you are no longer exhausted, stressed, or stretched thin. But for some, your peace is a trigger. When you live in a culture that treats exhaustion as a badge of honor, a woman who is well-rested and deeply supported is an anomaly. More than that, she is a mirror. When you sit at a table with women who are still deeply entrenched in the hustle, complaining about their burnout and competing in the struggle Olympics, your silence is deafening. Your very existence forces them to ask a terrifying question. If she doesn't have to live like this, why am I? Because most people do not want to do the terrifying work of changing their standards, they will try to change your reality instead. They will try to poke holes in your sanctuary. This is the subtle, insidious nature of sabotage. The must-be-nice phenomenon. Sabotage rarely comes in the form of a direct insult. It comes dressed as passive aggression. It sounds like a friend sighing and saying, "It must be nice to have a husband who takes care of everything." It sounds like a former colleague asking, "Don't you get bored just being at home all day?" It sounds like an aunt remarking, "I could never rely on a man like that. I'm too independent." These comments are designed to do one thing: bait you into a defense. They want you to feel guilty for your abundance. They want you to list the things you do, to prove that you are still working hard. They want to drag you back down into the dirt of the struggle, so they don't feel so alone in it. If you take the bait, you lose your power. The art of the gray rock. In psychology, there is a technique used to deal with manipulative or toxic people called gray rocking. The premise is simple. You make yourself as uninteresting and unresponsive as a gray rock. You give the person absolutely nothing to grip onto. No drama, no emotional reaction, no defense. In a life by design, gray rocking is how you handle the momentum year critics without ever losing your elegance. When someone throws a passive-aggressive comment at you, your instinct will be to justify your life. You will want to explain the 10 years of foundation, the personal dowry phase, and the systems you run. You must resist this urge entirely. When you gray rock, you flatten your emotional response and refuse to engage with the subtext of their insult. You agree with the premise, neutralize the sting, and pivot the conversation. The critic: it must be nice to just stay home and not have to worry about a real job. The gray rock response: it is incredibly nice. I'm very grateful. How are things at the office? The critic: I could never give up my independence like you did. The gray rock response: it's definitely a different path. Are you guys still planning that trip to the coast? Do you see what happens here? You starve the fire of oxygen. You do not apologize for your life, nor do you attack theirs. You simply become an unbothered, impenetrable surface. When people realize they cannot get an emotional reaction out of you, they will eventually stop trying to provoke you. The grief of outgrowing your circle. I need to prepare you for the hardest part of this chapter. As you implement your neutral boundaries and begin to gray rock the sabotage, you will realize that some relationships in your life were built entirely on shared misery. There are friendships that only existed because you were both complaining about the same corporate burnout or the same relationship struggles. When you heal, those relationships will lose their gravity. You must be willing to outgrow the rooms you used to shrink in. This is a quiet, private grief, but it is necessary. You cannot bring women who are committed to the struggle into your sanctuary. They will muddy the floors you just spent a decade cleaning. Protecting your ecosystem means recognizing that not everyone is equipped to walk with you in this new season. Let them go with grace. Do not force them to understand your choices, and do not let their lack of understanding disrupt your peace. Your life by design is not a debate topic. It is a masterpiece. Treat it with the reverence it deserves, and refuse to hand a paintbrush to anyone who only wants to paint it gray. Chapter 13, The Great Reset. Even the most beautifully curated life will occasionally encounter a storm. You can have the most impeccable systems, the most supportive partner, and the most fiercely guarded boundaries, but you are still human. There will be seasons of grief, unexpected illness, a new baby, or simply the accumulated weight of a busy year. When you have spent so much time intentionally designing your life, burnout can feel like a deep, personal betrayal. You might look around at your beautiful home and think, I built this to escape the hustle. Why do I feel so exhausted again? The instinct when this happens is to hide it. You don't want to admit to your husband, your friends, or yourself that you are overwhelmed because you feel like you should have it all together. But true self-care is not about maintaining the illusion of perfection. True self-care is knowing exactly how to shut the production down when the star of the show needs to rest. When the overwhelm hits, you do not push through. You execute a great reset. You strip your life down to the studs, defining the studs. In a home, the studs are the load-bearing framework. They are not pretty. They are not decorated. But they are the absolute minimum structure required to keep the roof from caving in. Stripping your life to the studs means identifying the absolute baseline required to keep your family safe, fed, and peaceful, and ruthlessly cutting everything else. During a great reset, the proof of contrast does not matter. Your community integration is paused. The beautiful multi-course dinners you usually enjoy preparing are replaced by takeout or simple, repetitive meals. The laundry might sit in baskets instead of being folded. If you have an anchor client, you politely invoke a pause clause in your contract or utilize your pre-built templates to do the bare minimum. You strip away the aesthetics of your life to protect the heartbeat of it. Your husband's shining hour. This is the moment where your careful vetting from phase 1 pays its greatest dividends. When you are operating at full capacity, you are the heart of the home, managing the rhythms and the beauty of your sanctuary. But when you are stripped to the studs, it is time for your husband to step to the forefront. A traditional dynamic is not a rigid trap. It is a fluid partnership. When my battery flashes red, I do not suffer in silence. I sit down with my husband and use a neutral, factual boundary. I have reached my absolute capacity. For the next 2 weeks, I am operating at baseline. I need you to absorb the rest. Because he is a man of character who views his role as a protector, he does not argue. He does not ask me to explain why I am tired. He simply picks up the slack. He handles the evening routines, manages the external noise, and stands guard at the door of our peace so I can recalibrate. You must allow yourself to be carried. If you insist on holding everything together while you are breaking, you are simply returning to the strong black woman trope, just in a nicer house. Dropping the guilt of the retreat, when you initiate a great reset, the outside world will demand to know where you went. Your community board will text you. Your friends will ask why you canceled lunch. Do not over-explain your absence. Women are conditioned to offer a diagnosis when they need a break. We feel we must prove we are sufficiently ill or deeply traumatized to justify our rest. You do not need a fever to earn a day in bed, and you do not need a tragedy to earn a season of quiet. Your response to the outside world should be brief, warm, and entirely unyielding. I am taking a quiet season at home right now to focus on my family. I will connect with you when my capacity opens back up. Let them be disappointed. Their disappointment is not your emergency. The graceful return. A great reset does not last forever. Eventually, the rest will do its work. You will wake up one morning and feel the familiar spark of radical curiosity return. You will want to cook a beautiful meal again. You will feel the desire to step back into your community or open your laptop for your client. When that capacity returns, do not rush to rebuild the entire house in a day. You add things back into your life one room at a time. You test the weight. You ensure that the systems are still serving you. And if they aren't, you redesign them before you fully engage. Burnout is not a sign that your life by design has failed. It is simply a sign that the seasons have changed, and it is time for the architect to rest. There is immense power in a woman who knows exactly when to stop, drop the aesthetic, and simply exist in the quiet safety of the foundation she built. Conclusion: the ultimate flex is peace. The world will tell you that having it all means doing it all. They will try to sell you a version of success that requires you to be exhausted, overextended, and perpetually running on a treadmill that never actually turns off. But by now, you know the truth. Having it all doesn't mean doing everything. It means having the absolute, uncompromising power to choose what you don't do. We have walked through the fire of the silent pivot together. You have looked the strong black woman trope in the eye and gracefully handed it back to a culture that never should have placed it on your shoulders. You have done the quiet, unglamorous work of shifting your standards. You have learned how to vet for a partner of true character, how to strategically invest your own resources, and how to cultivate a sanctuary that serves you rather than you constantly serving it. You have stopped performing for an audience that only claps when you are struggling. The reality of the arrival. When you finally arrive at your momentum year, when the systems are humming, your partnership is secure, and your days belong entirely to you, it will not look like a chaotic celebration. It will not look like the highlight reels on social media. It will look like a Tuesday morning where you sip your tea slowly, knowing there is no urgent email waiting to dictate your mood. It will look like a husband who walks out the door with purpose, proud to carry the financial weight of the world so you can curate the world within. It will look like a nervous system that is finally beautifully regulated. You will realize that the ultimate flex is not a corporate title, a designer bag, or a packed schedule. The ultimate flex is peace, the generational shift. Do not underestimate what you are doing. When you choose to live a life by design, you are doing more than just saving yourself from burnout. You are breaking a generational cycle. You are showing the women around you, and more importantly, the children coming up behind you, that a woman's worth is not measured by her capacity to suffer. You are leaving a legacy of grace, stability, and strategic brilliance. You are proving that a woman can be fiercely intelligent, deeply impactful, and completely at rest, all at the same time. You have done the work. The roots are deep. The sanctuary is secure. Now the only thing left to do is actually enjoy it. The glossary of frameworks, the architecture of a life by design, is built upon a new vocabulary. The world will try to force you back into the language of the hustle, the struggle, and the corporate grind. To protect your sanctuary, you must anchor yourself in the strategic frameworks that built it. These are the core principles of your piece. The erasure effect. Definition: the cultural demotion that occurs the moment a woman chooses the four walls of her home over the glass walls of an office. It is society's false assumption that the removal of a corporate title equates to the removal of your ambition, your strategic intellect, and your professional value. The strategy, the erasure effect, only works if you allow yourself to be erased. A strategic woman recognizes that leaving the corporate ladder is not a step down, nor is it an exit. It is a reallocation of assets. You are taking your highest value resources, your time and your talent, and redirecting them to the only organization that truly belongs to you. Your home. The conflict loop. Definition: a self-sabotaging psychological cycle rooted in the strong Black woman trope and a cultural diet of entertainment-based drama. It is the unconscious habit of seeking out chaos, overworking, and taking on unpaid labor simply to feel valuable. The strategy: because society wires us to find comfort in chaos and view shared stability with suspicion, the conflict loop must be intentionally broken. We dismantle this by rewiring our nervous systems for the boredom of peace. We replace the high-energy treadmill of the single-parent struggle with the quiet, steady architecture of the peace loop, the personal dowry. Definition: the strategic temporary deployment of a woman's personal savings to fund the transition from a 50-50 financial split into a traditional sole provider dynamic. The strategy: a capable man requires a runway to shift his psychology and career to carry the full weight of a family. Utilizing your savings as a personal dowry is not subsidizing a roommate. It is acting as an investor in your family's future peace. It buys the most valuable asset in a marriage, time, allowing him to build his capacity while you upskill in private. Standard Operating Peace, SOP. Definition: the elegant systematization of your daily life. It is the process of identifying friction points through radical curiosity and creating automated rhythms to solve them. The strategy: in the corporate world, systems ensure nothing falls through the cracks. In a life by design, a system is the ultimate act of self-care. By documenting your excellence and creating manuals for the predictable parts of your day, you eliminate decision fatigue. You make a decision once so you never have to waste your energy making it again, freeing your mind for the unpredictable beauty of living. The proof of contrast. Definition: the undeniable, blinding difference between a woman who operates from a place of secured peace and a world that operates in a perpetual state of low-grade panic. The strategy: when you integrate into community groups, boards, or business environments, you do not need to loudly demand respect or hand over a resume. You command it by calmly delivering flawless execution while others are scrambling. The ease with which you operate becomes your marketing, and your elegance becomes your brand. It is the ultimate leverage that allows you to seamlessly transition from a helpful volunteer to an indispensable consultant. Begin your private build. Reading this manifesto is only the beginning of your cultivation. You now understand the cultural problem, the necessity of the silent pivot, and the profound power of becoming the architect of your own home. But a blueprint is only as valuable as its execution. Transitioning to a life by design requires deep, rigorous intentionality. You must shift from reading about peace to actively systematizing it. To help you execute your own silent pivot and begin applying these frameworks immediately, I have created a complimentary standard operating peace audit. This exclusive digital tool is designed to help you strip your current rhythms down to the studs. It will guide you through the practice of radical curiosity, helping you identify the hidden friction points in your daily routine, locate where your energy is leaking, and lay the foundation for the systems that will fiercely protect your sanctuary. Download the guide and begin your audit at Step Out of the Hustle, Curate Your Peace, Private Strategy and Consulting. Borrow My Peace. You understand the cultural problem. You know the profound value of the silent pivot. You are ready to stop managing the chaos and start curating your life. But reading about a life by design and actively implementing it are two different seasons. Sometimes, establishing the rhythms required to protect your peace requires an objective, strategic eye. When you work with me, you are not paying for generic advice or more busy work to add to your plate. You are paying for access to my capacity. You are borrowing my peace while we establish yours. I work privately with a select number of women and community leaders to audit their current ecosystems, navigate their personal transitions, and design their own standard operating peace. Because true security means growing only at the exact rate of my capacity, I take on a strictly limited number of private clients each season. This ensures that my family receives my best, and my clients receive an unparalleled level of strategic clarity, ways we can align, the standard operating peace audit, private intensive, the catalyst for your pivot. A dedicated, one-on-one strategic intensive where we look closely at the exact friction points in your daily routine. We will evaluate your personal battery, establish your neutral boundaries, and design customized, elegant rhythms that allow your home and life to run beautifully on autopilot. Starting at $500. 2. Capacity Consulting, monthly retainer for the community leader or visionary. If you are running an organization, board, or private endeavor and are exhausted by the perpetual state of low-grade panic around you, I step in to provide the proof of contrast. I work with a very limited number of anchor clients to streamline communication, organize chaotic systems, and elevate your operational standard without requiring your constant emotional bandwidth. Available by application only. The next step, you do not need an invitation to live beautifully, but if you desire high-level support as you make your transition, consider this yours. If you are ready to stop performing for an audience and start curating a life that elegantly sustains itself, let us begin. Apply for private strategy and consulting. Direct inquiries, Alyssa at